Germany has revamped its military service model, according to an official announcement made on Thursday. Starting from the 1st of January 2026, all men aged 18 and above would be required to register for potential military service. Around 700,000 young people, born in 2008 or later, will be contacted to complete their registrations. The new law also mandates all men of legal age to submit to medical screenings, as well as complete a questionnaire detailing their willingness to serve. As things stand, military service will remain on a voluntary basis, which Defense Minister Boris Pistorius believes will be enough.
Wir setzen ganz klar auf Freiwilligkeit. Wir gestalten einen attraktiven Dienst. Die Ausbildung verändert sich, die Bezahlung verändert sich. Das verändert sich gerade grundlegend bis hin zur Ausbildung am Drohnen. Also es ist insgesamt ein völlig neues Bild des Wehrdienstes, das da jetzt entsteht und schon begonnen hat zu entstehen.
However, if things don't go according to plan, Berlin plans to reintroduce compulsory service through a new set of legislative procedures. The move, Pistorius says, is crucial for Germany to enhance its defense readiness, as well as meet its NATO commitments, pledged to achieve by 2035.
We need to accept losing our children in order to protect who we are. That was a recent chilling warning from French Army Chief of Staff about a potential confrontation with Russia by 2030. For some of us, war still sounds like a distant threat. But when it comes, who will be called to the front line? All over Europe, conscription is back. 10 EU countries already have compulsory service for men, from Cyprus to Finland. Next year, Germany is set to send military questionnaires to 18 years olds. But there is a catch. Their constitution bans drafting women. So while men must answer, for women it remains voluntary. But is war just a man's thing? In the Nordics, it's equal. Denmark and Sweden draft women, and Norway was the first NATO ally to do so. And in Ukraine, over 70,000 women serve, with 20,000 in combat roles. That is almost equal to the entire combined armies of Belgium and the Netherlands. Big armies drain funds from healthcare and innovation. But as Ukraine proves, the price of sovereignty is high. NATO allies could say that they have the luxury of debating this only because Ukrainians are still holding the line. If they had given up, the war wouldn't be on their doorstep, it would be on ours. If this comes, would you be ready to answer the call?
From statements to actions, here's which countries are pouring the most money into defense. After huge pressure from the United States to ramp up military budgets, Europe is responding. In 2025, the continent spent 739 billion euros on defense, up 14% year-on-year and twice as much as 10 years ago. Germany means business with a 24% increase. In 2025, it pumped in 97 billion euros, overtaking the UK and becoming the world's fourth largest military spender behind the US, China and Russia. Another major economy which isn't shying away is Italy, with a 20% increase, now neck and neck with Israel for military spending. Habitual NATO underperformer, Spain went even further with a 50% jump, bringing its military spending up to the alliance's former 2% of GDP target for the first time since the early 90s. Looking at defense spending as a share of GDP gives a clearer picture of who is treating defense as a national priority. In Europe, the countries leading the pack all border Russia. Poland is on top, allocating 4.5% of its GDP to weapons and defense infrastructure. Latvia comes second at 3.6%, followed by Estonia and Norway. At the other end of the spectrum are Iceland with nearly 0%, Ireland and Switzerland.
So this week, as I said, chiefs of defence will be flocking to Brussels to celebrate. But are you all on the same page when it comes to the threats facing the Union today?
Oh, very much so. I think flocking into celebrations, I think it's a moment of reflection more than celebration. I think it's a time to pause and reflect how far the European military committee, but the European paradigm of security and defence has come as a whole over that period of time. No more so in the last 4 years, and you've mentioned it, Ukraine, which is the number one priority for all of us and the focus of everyone. Although we do come from the geographical spaces throughout Europe, so it's north, south, east and west, and we take all of these things into consideration, but Ukraine, of course, is the primacy and the priority in which we examine it. And this week, of course, with the Chiefs of Defence, we will be looking at shaping the challenges that influence all of us, what our responses are to that, and through our reflections in our meetings, then we will be looking at the key issues such as the European security strategy, the defence readiness, and primarily then, of course, Ukraine, where we will be joined by General Syrski from Ukrainian forces himself.
And you just mentioned Ukraine this morning, reporting of reports of 500 drones, dozens of missiles being fired into Ukraine. A serious escalation in the last couple of days there. Does this forum, though, carry any weight?
Well, this isn't serious escalation. This, unfortunately, is happening on a regular basis. And the extraordinary resilience of the Ukrainian armed forces, but the Ukrainian people as a whole has transformed Ukraine into a fortress nation now. And Ukraine, from a European point of view, is integral to the future security of Europe. So this isn't just beneficiaries of European charity. This is strategic initiative and imperative for Europe.
But can the EU ever transition to this military powerhouse?
The EU doesn't have to transition to a military powerhouse. Let's be very clear. The defence and deterrence of the Euro-Atlantic area, the responsibility for this lies with NATO. Europe brings huge strength in terms of military advices, in terms of economic power, industrial power, and its ability then to, through its common security and defence policy instruments, to bring stability, security to many areas. We've seen it in the Western Balkans, which was the initial, I suppose, start out through Concordia of the EU Military Committee way back 25 years ago. But since then, when we reflect on what the EU has done, we'll see it in the Middle East through what the EU is trying to do in terms of the Lebanon going forward with the withdrawal of UNIFIL. We see it in terms of our missions and operations, 15 of which we have completed in the last 25 years. Currently, there are 9 live missions and operations. And the power of the EU is exercised, for instance, through our EU military assistant mission, where we have trained 93,000 soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces to date. And we will continue unrelentingly doing this, and we will shape the future of the armed forces of Ukraine with the help of the 27 member states, working coherently together.
OK, Sean Clancy, thank you so much for coming into us today
on
your news on Europe Today.
Which European countries conscript women into the army? Conflicting claims are circulating online that women are purposefully being excluded from the German army and that women are being forced into the German military amid a national debate about mandatory military service. The German government is introducing a measure requiring all men to register for potential military service from January 2026, with compulsory service to be reintroduced if volunteer numbers fall short. While young men will be obliged to fill out the registration and attend compulsory medical screenings, women can do so on a voluntary basis. The distinction has sparked a wave of debate and claims across social media, some of which have blurred the line between criticism and misinformation. As things stand, the German constitution specifically says men may be required to perform service in the armed forces from the age of 18, but it doesn't mention women. Women aren't excluded from joining the army, they're just not legally required to do so. They're increasingly taking up roles on the front line. This isn't unique to Germany, although some countries that have introduced conscription have included both men and women. Norway brought in mandatory military service for women in 2015, making it the first NATO country to do so. Sweden followed suit in 2017 as part of a broader move to reintroduce conscription after suspending it in 2010. Most recently, Denmark updated its conscription policy to include women, in a lottery-style system that will come into effect in 2026. All the other European countries that have conscription make it compulsory only for men, with women being able to volunteer. These include Austria, Cyprus and Greece. In other European countries, neither women nor men are required to serve in the military, but they can volunteer in varying capacities. Is Germany sending armed police to conscript young men? Did you see this video going around on social media?
Hard work to earn my pay.
People claim it shows armed police going from door to door in Berlin, registering young men for the German army. Its caption says military police are conscripting men between the ages of 18 and 35 for war with Russia, but it's not true. Although the footage is real, it can be traced back to the Dutch city of Leeuwarden, not Berlin. The Dutch Ministry of Defense told theCUBE that the armed personnel seen in the video were taking part in a so-called social patrol. According to reports, the patrol was intended to allow soldiers to engage with the public, not to register people for military service. The Netherlands does not currently have active conscription. While the legal framework exists, compulsory service has been suspended since 1997, and the Dutch government says it doesn't call up conscripts. When people turn 17, they're sent a letter asking if they'd like to join the armed forces or not. Germany also doesn't send armed forces from door to door to enlist soldiers. While the government did recently introduce a form of voluntary military service, men are required to fill in an online questionnaire. It's not the first time that misleading narratives have circulated around military service in Europe, at a time when countries are working to modernize their armed forces amid tensions with Russia. But even where conscription is active, recruitment in Europe is not enforced by armed patrols. For more investigations and fact checks, take a look at Euronews.com.
Germany's ambitious military rearmament drive is running into a problem far more basic than strategy or funding. The Bundeswehr increasingly lacks the spare parts needed to keep its frontline equipment operational. Internal documents from HIL, the state-owned company responsible for maintaining much of Germany's military hardware, reportedly reveal a growing repair backlog that is leaving large portions of the Army's most important combat systems unavailable for service. According to reports by Süddeutsche Zeitung, WDR and NDR, only around half of Germany's fleet of PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers, Marder infantry fighting vehicles, and Boxer armored personnel carriers were operational as of May. The remainder were reportedly undergoing lengthy repair and maintenance procedures, often delayed by shortages of critical components. The figures raise uncomfortable questions for Berlin at a time when Chancellor Friedrich Merz is pledging to transform the Bundeswehr into Europe's strongest conventional military force and expand Germany's role as a leading security provider on the continent. The problem is not a lack of equipment on paper. It is the growing difficulty of keeping existing equipment combat-ready. According to the reports, HIL is tasked with maintaining at least 70% operational readiness across the Army's heavy equipment inventory. Company executives reportedly warned that availability rates for some platforms could fall as low as 30% following major military exercises, as maintenance facilities struggled to process damaged and worn vehicles returning from training. The reported internal assessment paints a picture of structural problems inside Germany's defense logistics system. HIL reportedly warned that the absence of long-term procurement contracts has made sourcing spare parts increasingly difficult, creating bottlenecks that can keep vehicles out of service for extended periods. The revelations come as Germany continues one of the largest military expansion programs in its post-Cold War history. Since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict, Berlin has committed hundreds of billions of euros to defense modernization, expanded ammunition production, and accelerated procurement programs aimed at rebuilding capabilities that had been neglected for decades. The timing is politically awkward for Berlin. German officials have repeatedly cited the need to strengthen the Bundeswehr in response to what they describe as a growing Russian threat. Moscow has dismissed such claims and accused Western governments of using security concerns to justify large-scale military expansion. For Germany, however, the challenge may be less about acquiring new tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery systems than ensuring the ones already in service can actually leave the maintenance depot. The Bundeswehr's rearmament effort was designed to solve a capability gap. These reports suggest Germany may now be confronting a readiness gap as well.
And we got no help from NATO. We got no help, zero from NATO. You know, we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. We got no help. We didn't need it, but we got none. I said, would you like to come? Yeah, you're fired. He said, fire him. No, they know they got problems. No, it was a paper tiger.
Fresh disputes between Trump and NATO leaders over the ongoing Middle East conflict are pushing the European leaders to seriously consider a future in which Washington, D.C. does not lead the alliance. A major strategic shift may already be underway inside NATO. According to NPR, several European countries are now quietly preparing for a future where the alliance may no longer be led by the United States. The report suggests Europe is increasingly discussing how NATO would function if Washington steps back from its traditional leadership role, amid growing global tensions and uncertainty over America's long-term military commitments. Germany is reportedly emerging as a possible new center of gravity inside the alliance. NPR reports that Germany's sharply increased military spending and strong backing for Ukraine are now placing it at the center of Europe's evolving security calculations. Meanwhile, Ivo Daalder, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO under President Barack Obama, said Trump does not believe that America's security depended on the security of Europe. The position defies decades of foreign policy logic, going back to the end of the Second World War, when NATO was founded by the U.S., Canada, and their European allies to provide a bulwark against then-Soviet aggression. Last week, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz had said that the United States appeared to lack a clear exit strategy in Iran, and that Tehran humiliated Washington in peace talks.
It is clear that the Americans have no strategy whatsoever. And the problem with such conflicts is always, it is not just about how you get in, you also have to figure out how to get out. We witnessed that quite painfully in Afghanistan for 20 long years, and we saw that same scenario play out in Iraq as well. I don't see at the moment which strategic exit the Americans are choosing now, especially since the Iranians are obviously negotiating very skillfully, or perhaps just as skillfully not negotiating at all. And having the Americans travel to Islamabad only to have them leave again empty-handed. An entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian leadership, and in particular by those who are commonly known as the infamous Revolutionary Guards.
This week, the Donald Trump administration announced plans to withdraw 5,000 U.S. service members, about 14% of the roughly 36,000 troops stationed in Germany.
Why is the U.S. removing troops from Germany?
We're going to cut way down, and we're cutting a lot further than 5,000. Thank you very much.
According to an NPR report, the troops' withdrawal move came as Berlin said plans formulated during the Biden administration to deploy U.S.-made Tomahawk missiles to Germany might be shelved.
European leaders are very familiar with how to handle pressure and power moves from American President Donald Trump. And President Trump's latest move is to threaten to pull out thousands of American troops from American bases inside Germany. European leaders reacted to that here in Yerevan, Armenia, at a European Political Community Summit with calm and without shock. Europe is well aware that it needs to do more to defend itself. In fact, there's a spending plan for NATO members to spend more money on their own defense. But European leaders are also well aware that they don't possess the nuclear arsenal that the U.S. does. So you're never going to hear an equally shocking public complaint from a European leader, because they know ultimately they still need to cooperate with the President of the United States.
But the Iran war has raised a serious question. If the U.S. actually withdraws from NATO, will the European nations could be able to protect themselves against what they fear, a Russian invasion?